Everybody joining me on the show today is J.d. Byars, the director of broadcasting for South Alabama, play-by-play as well, and also check him out ESPN Plus. And J.D., I appreciate you coming on the show to talk about the South Alabama Jaguars.
Yeah, it's gosh, right about 48 hours now. It'll be the Jags and the Green Wave. You and I were talking, and I think it definitely is. I think it's the marquee Group of Five game in the country to get the official Week One started because South Alabama was a 10-win program last year, almost beating UCLA in the Rose Bowl out in Pasadena. The Bruins had to kick a last-second field goal to take their first and only but decisive lead in the game, and then you got Tulane under a really good Willie Fritz head coach who did beat the other LA school, USC, in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, it is, and I was just kind of looking at the schedule. I mean, like you said, Group of Five. This is it. This is the matchup. It's going to be a lot of fun. And with Tulane being ranked, big deal there. South Alabama can win that one, knock a ranked team off. Who knows? Maybe they can get into the polls pretty quickly. But
Would be our second ranked opponent. We beat we beat San Diego State in Mobile a few years back. I think we had to do it in overtime, but it was a good win. We'd like to do it again.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So before we jump into South Alabama and that game, I saw you because it's like I had you on, like I said, middle of this year last year, and I had you on. It was South Alabama Troy week. Just quickly, just your career in broadcast and how did it all get started?
Uh, so as far as sports, I really began my broadcast career as a disc jockey. I was spinning the hits, man. Uh, that wasn't really and that was kind of a means to an end where I knew what I wanted to do, which is this. Uh, but just getting in and getting some on-air experience, finding out uh, how things work from in studio to remote equipment. I go back to the days of using a Marty and a Yagi antenna, and the two had to meet line of sight, and then if you were outside of that area, you had to get a phone line, and there was no such thing really as cell phone hookups at the time. If you had a cell phone, it was a backbone putting out about 3 watts, and that could be dangerous, unhealthy at all. But my first job in broadcasting, you bring that up. This is going to mark my 30th year in broadcasting this year, so it's kind of come an unusual way. I knew this is what I wanted to do, was full-time sportscasting in some fashion. I spent 11 and a half years as a television news reporter, did some sports anchoring as well, but just really love the role I have at South Alabama. There's only, I think, 133 voices of FBS college programs. So to be in one of those positions is coveted, comes with a lot of responsibility, but it's really a joy.
So when you're on the music side of radio, that was before it was computerized and all that stuff. It was literally disc jockey. I guess you
Oh
wouldn't
yeah.
use that now because everything's computerized. So that was back when it was a little bit probably a little bit more interesting getting it going then.
Yeah, because I was kind of that last generation that was coming in as we were making a transition from vinyl, being records, into CDs and cassettes, and then we went into hard drives. I remember it was called Scott Studio, and it had all the digital stash of your commercials, all of your jingles, uh, and of course the music as well. So we thought we'd really hit some modern times when that happened. But the biggest fun was when I got my first job. It was whoever would hire me, and you had to have a disc jockey in the station on the mic 24/7. That's weekends, overnights, and I was a weekend overnight guy just to get my foot in the door. Uh, and then eventually I was the 7 to midnight disc jockey when we made the switch from top 40 to classic rock. And I was thought, okay, I can just work the rest of my years here. I can now spend some Leonard Skinner and Marshall Tucker. The world is good. Uh, but yeah, I wouldn't trade those times for anything.
You talked about this is something you always wanted to do. Was there a broadcaster when you were growing up that you looked up to?
Yeah, when I came up, when you were still looking at college football and ESPN in its infancy, where there was only a handful, and I mean counting on one hand, college football games in America being played.
Mhm.
CBS and ABC were getting in on it. ESPN, was really to one channel. We didn't have the U's and the twos and SEC Network and all of that stuff. Uh, so, there was also by way of that only a handful of announcers. But on the television side, I always had a big, deep admiration for Keith Jackson because even to this day, uh, Keith could still play well in any market in America. He
Mhm.
was from Carrollton, Georgia. Everybody identifies him as the state of Washington because of where he went to college, but he was really from a little town right outside of Atlanta, probably closer to the Alabama state line than Atlanta. And he always had the southern delivery. He had the southern colloquialisms, and he could sneak those in. And he didn't like change his voice or his delivery to sound cookie cutter. Uh,
Mhm.
Now you get a lot of what I call cookie cutter. They're coming from the same university up north. Uh, and I'm not saying they're bad. They put their work in just like anybody else. They've gone to college, they've gotten their degree, and they've really focused on it. But a lot of them sound the same, and it seems like it's hard to get any attention on the national side, and it's hard to come by because you've got to sound like you're Midwestern, almost completely uh, neutral in your dialect or your accent. So I've had to work on that some on a radio side, being in state most of my life. You have, Jim Fifes, Eli Golds, those guys, you would listen to and emulate some, but also just dream and think of how'd they get their job. I would really like to go find that out, but you didn't have the web, you didn't have Facebook and social media channels. So the closest I got to those guys was when I was working in television and, try to make friends as best you can. But anybody who keeps their nose to the grindstone and works and really doesn't look at it as glamour or white collar, but has a blue collar mentality can get to just about anything they work for.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's what I'm trying to do. So,
Yeah, yeah,
so oh, let's look at South Alabama. I mentioned a little bit, 10-3 last year. We won't talk about the bowl game, but the regular
yeah.
season look very close to being a 12-0 team when you really look at it. 4-point loss to Troy, then a 1-point loss to UCLA. So many starters coming back. I think 18 to 20 starters coming back, and offensively, you pretty much have all your big name players. Lost one receiver, but you've got Carter Bradley, quarterback, coming back. I mean, you got so much talent. I mean, what's the excitement level there in Mobile with this team?
Well, expectations are definitely high, and because of what you just said, not only that many starters back, which is a story in itself, because everybody in America gets hit by the transfer portal, but somehow South Alabama doesn't.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying we have a huge NIL collective. We have one, but it's not busting at the seams with millions of dollars by any means. We are close to the beach. Uh, but they bought into Kane Womack. And so, over and above the players who've stuck it out and like the culture, they like what Kane Womack's building. But anytime you have 10 wins in a group of five, somebody's going to come poaching, whether it's
Mhm.
for a coordinator. And the entire coaching staff, minus one paid assistant, are also back, including offensive coordinator Major Applewhite, defensive coordinator Corey Batoon. They're doing big things. And yeah, with 10 wins last year, the expectations, that does bring pressure, and you got to keep a team grounded. But, hearkening back to the last game, which was not a good one in the Superdome against Western Kentucky, here is a chance to go straight back to the Crescent City and open the year where things have left a bad taste in your mouth in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't even thought about that element of it from where they were at the bowl game to this. I just kind of just forgot their bowl game just because it was not that does not define that game did not define their season. You know who they were with the
Oh,
12
yeah.
games they played in the regular season. And with Carter Bradley, him coming back, one of the best quarterbacks. I think he's top 20 college football, top 15. He's a really good quarterback. And then also you look at one of the very best in the Sun Belt, top three there. Oh, where do you want to see him take his game this year? Where would you like to see him develop?
Well, you know, he's a son of an NFL assistant. So I
Mhm.
think his noggin, his cerebrum, he's able to really grasp the game at a totally bigger level academic wise. He can get in a film room. He can either watch film or hear instruction, and then he can translate it into a practice and execute it. Uh, so he brings that side. And then one of the best arms I've ever seen. You know, when Kane Womack got here from Indiana, he said it was as good as Michael Penix, and that's rare air. Who, of course, Penix went to Washington State and is a really strong arm on the collegiate level. But having weapons at wide receiver has never been a problem at South Alabama. The last 3 years consecutive, they put one in the NFL. Uh, you know, I think you've got four in the last 6 years, five in the last seven. So you can get to the NFL at South Alabama by way of wide receiver, but you got to have the weapons. Last
Mhm.
year, not deep enough at running back. This year, very deep at running back. A lot of talent in that room, uh, and that cost us a game. You were mentioning could have been 12-0. The Troy game, 10-6, and not many good breaks at all. And played that game without LaDamian Webb, guy who started his career at Florida State. He's back. That's a guy who rushed for over 1,000 yards last year, missed the Troy game completely, and then kind of came back sparingly trying to get back. So he didn't have as many carries as he would have in the subsequent games up until the end of the season when he was full go. He's a punishing runner, but he's also very fast. But now you got Braylon McReynolds, who's a Mobile guy. He's going into his sophomore campaign, and have added a guy with a lot of experience in Kentrell Bullock, who's a
Mhm.
former Ole Miss Rebel. So really glad to have him there as well with the likes of P.J. Martin and some of those guys.
In that receiver, you got Devin Voice and you got Colin Lacey there at the wide receivers. How
Yeah.
about who's going to be the number 3 guy? You think?
Uh, there's a young man named Anthony Eager. Uh, there is, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his last name all of a sudden, but Javon, who is from Memphis. I think he's probably going to answer the call, maybe even more so than Eager. But they've got height. They've got experience. They've got talent. Actually, watching these guys in scrimmages has really been a joy. They kind of remind me, just those two guys, and specifically of high pointing the ball as Jalen Tolbert did, who is now a Dallas Cowboy and was an early draft pick 2 years ago. So I think they'll be there. Tight end is somebody who gets involved a lot in this passing game under Major Applewhite. They also have to factor in with their hand down on the ground, come in and be able to move bodies as a true next to the tackle tight end. But that
Mhm.
room is really full. I'm talking 5 or 6 guys that on the hoof look like they could be on an NFL roster. You know, 6'3" to 6'6", broad shouldered, and can be punishing blockers.
On the defense side of the ball, you talked about all the players coming back, and you also go look at someone coming back from 2021 and Keith Gallman in the secondary.
Yeah.
How big is that having him back on the team on the defense for this year?
Yeah, when he went out preseason a year ago. The year before that was our leading tackler, or near the top, and a lot of pass breakups. Uh, he kind of is that safety who can play sideline to sideline, but also kind of be the mentality and leader of a middle linebacker. So he's kind of the captain on that side. But then he goes down, and then you had a guy named Yam Banks step
Mhm.
up, and he kind of became the quarterback on the defense. He was a vocal leader, got guys in the right formations. So now you got two guys like that because Yam Banks is back from a year ago. He had that really cool, I think it was a Sports Center one-handed INT in the bowl game. And they're very anchored. They bring their lunch pail. They're good guys. Any kind of recruiting transfers just to get by uh, Kane Womack and Corey Batoon's colander, if you will, to see if you got that right fit. You got to be a good person. They won't take low character guys, just regardless of their athletic ability. They don't want them coming in and being a cancer. So, upperclassmen leadership and guys like Keith Gallman, who you bring up, and then you got Yam Banks. Quentin Wilfon is just an unbelievable headhunter. They put him on the edge. He's now going to be an edge rusher. very good at middle linebacker because he could play sideline to sideline. He was big, but he could also be very mobile. I think the goal of creating havoc this year, all three of those guys I mentioned could be very successful.
Yeah, and you're looking at adding to a defense last year. That was top 3 in Sunbelt and points allowed and total defense, and they were really good against the run too. I mean, South Alabama was really good at making you one-dimensional. And, with all these players back, you gotta expect the same thing this year.
And to up that, I've kind of asked what are goals because Kane Womack, after a 10-win campaign, said, and this was mere hours or less than a week after the game, in a public setting and to the team, we do what we did this year, next year, meaning the season we're about to go into. If they do the exact same things, they will be very unsuccessful because now you're on everybody's radar. It's all out there on film. The intangibles have to get better, and leaders have to lead, so coaches don't have to stop practice and talk about culture things, about why we do things to better the team and to better the program. And so I think they've learned from that, and having all of those faces back and having that depth, but also the intangibles, I think will be a big difference maker this year to try to win those big ball games and not take any opponent for granted. There's situations where Central Michigan, we go up there last year and they had a lot of holes, but they got Jim McElwain sitting over there as head coach. We have to kick a field goal to win the game.
Mhm.
So they weren't all easy. And, we'll have to win some tight ones and get some breaks this year.
Speaking of one of the matchups, we alluded to it at the beginning. The matchup with Tulane, and we mentioned a couple times here. Go in there, they're ranked 24th. And kind of in a way they feel like it's offensively and kind of their situation almost mirrors South Alabama a little bit. They were 2-10, turn around. They go 12-2. Great year last year for them. Their quarterback is back. And Michael Pratt, he's a really good runner. I think underrated. They've got players back on their team as well.
You'll probably see him in the Senior Bowl, I think.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and, he was a quarterback too. You kinda heard rumors that he was going the portal too. He comes back. You mentioned Willie Fritz. He's back as head coach too as well. Oh, when you look at this matchup with South Alabama and Tulane, what's gonna be key for South Alabama to come out with a victory?
I think why he may transfer would be because they just don't throw the ball enough. And I think he's a problem for defenses because he can extend a play and he can hurt you with his feet. The guy can, you get a team in 3rd and long, you kind of like your chances. But when Pratt's back there, he can eat up real estate in a hurry and move the chains. But I think he wants to show his arm because if he's going to be on the next level, he doesn't necessarily want to be in that Trey Lance mold. I think we saw how that's worked out.
Yeah.
So you really got to hem this guy in, but it starts by creating havoc. And that goes back to what we were talking about with Kane Womack saying we can't do the same thing we did last year. And he was challenging his defense and his coordinators and his players. This difference this year from the defense has to be able to create havoc. That is to flush a quarterback. That's to get him to throw earlier than he normally would like to, or set his feet or get his shoulders, and create some coverage situations where he doesn't have anybody to throw to. So I think that will be something they want to establish early defensively, but they will have their work cut out. What an opener to be able to face that quarterback in such a good program.
What's kinda interesting, I was looking at, and I kinda forgot about this. So they're replacing their defense coordinator, and Shill Wood is the new defense coordinator at Tulane. Obviously, a defense that South Alabama has seen before. Different players, obviously, different team. But how much of a factor do you think that's gonna play? Because they've seen it. They know what the concepts are.
Yeah, if you play Troy, you know how to prepare for a defense at Tulane because he comes over from somebody in the conference, just happens to be our rival. But not to downplay it, he's a very good defensive coordinator. But that gives you a variety of film to watch too. Last year, Southern Miss was not a very good football team, but they're a team on the rise. And I say that to compliment their head coach because Will Hall and I are not only very close personal friends, we're also letterman and alumni of the same university. We both played at North Alabama, so he and I are very close. He was a former offensive coordinator for Willie Fritz. He takes the head job at Southern Miss. Southern Miss has a whale of a year last year, but guess who popped them? Southern Miss. Now, the Golden Eagles needed some things to go their way, and they got them. They blocked a punt, and that led to a score. They also got a pick six late in the game that puts Southern Miss up 10 and forces Tulane to have to press, and Southern Miss survived, got the win. So they got some breaks, but I think you also got to watch that film, because if anybody knows how to, execute and put a game plan together and script for Tulane, it would be Will Hall.
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting. I'm looking forward to that game. I will have the two TVs going. I'll have one TV on probably North Carolina and South Carolina, but I will have the other one on that one with Tulane and South Alabama. And JD, before I let you go, everybody out there want to listen to, check out you broadcast at South Alabama. How can they do that?
So across the state of Alabama, we're on 13 radio stations. Up in the Shoals, West Central Alabama, we're in Huntsville, Decatur, Athens. We're in Birmingham. We're in Montgomery. We're in the Wiregrass. We're on a station, Dothan, Ozark Enterprise. We got a exposure in Troy, Alabama. We're in Montgomery. I think I said that, and of course down on the Gulf Coast as well. But anywhere in America on the iHeartRadio app, iHeart's free, and you can search Sports Talk 99.5, Sports Talk 99.5. And we have 2 hours of pregame coverage, meaning on the network will start at 5 o'clock, taking fans up to a 7 o'clock kick down in the Big Easy. Let's hope it is easy. And South Alabama starts 1-0.
And where can they follow you at?
So I don't know about you. I'm a big Facebook guy. I'm older, but most of my sports is Twitter. It's kind of weird how my social media is different parts of my life, and I feel like Twitter is more of the sports, and it's at Jags Voice J.d, Jags plural Voice J.d on Twitter. And I love to get, you can direct message me. I don't have that block. You can send me a private message. I don't care. I like to talk sports. It doesn't have to be in our league or the Sun Belt. And Phillip, you do a great job. I think, the things you like to talk about are the things I like to talk about.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I get people upset sometimes when I start talking NFL. They said, I said, good gracious, it's football.
I've never done fantasy, but here's a little thing about me. I'm a sports card collector.
Mm-hmm.
I was bored silly during COVID, as many were that got back into the hobby, and I've stayed in it. I love sports cards. It was all baseball cards when I was little in the 80s, growing up, starting to collect. I was born in 71, but got into baseball cards in the mid 80s. But it keeps me in the game, because collecting sports cards, I really didn't follow the NBA. Well, now I do. I know the marquee player and maybe the second or third best on every team in the league and every franchise. Baseball, it keeps me a lot more in tune with, who are the prospects, but who are the stars, who are the future Hall of Famers, and definitely football. And I kind of feel like now I could almost pick a good fantasy team. I've just never done it.
Yeah, it changes the way you watch games on Sundays. Because I'm a Packers fan, so I'm always rooting for the Packers. But sometimes if they're playing a team that has one of my players on it, I'm kind of like, I want you guys to win, but maybe it's a shootout, so that guy over there can get a lot of yards and some points. So it does kind of it will challenge your allegiance if you have a favorite team. Sometimes, not necessarily the win and the win, but just kind of how they get there. So it's it's a fun one too as well. But this has been fun, JD. I appreciate you taking the time to come on, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Man, anytime. Thanks, Phillip, for the invitation. Hope everybody has a great college football season. Be safe and enjoy it. It's just a game.
Absolutely.